Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It's Sunday night. It's October 25, 2020. Just about a week or so. 9 days from Election Day. I hope you're ready for that. Are you signed up to receive our weekly rundown of topics? We send out an email every week, let you know what we're going to be talking about. It's the only email you get from me unless there's an emergency, something happens. All you have to do is just email thebibleforum@gmail.com. You email that, we'll get your address, we'll put you on the list. We've got a lot of things to talk about tonight. Seems like there's never an end to the kinds of things that we could talk about. During the week, as I am working through the news, I throw more stuff in the trash than I put up on the board. It's just that kind of thing, the election, and there's just so many pieces running around here. We've got a Senate Judiciary Committee that is approving Judge Barrett's nomination. This past week on Thursday, the Senate Judiciary Committee approved Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, it was done along party lines. The Democrats wanted no part of it. They boycotted the vote. When the Senate meets next week, it's expected that the Republican majority will vote to give her the next open seat, or not the next, but the open seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. The question becomes, will the Democrats show up? We're talking 3-year-olds here. Forget it. At the debate, did you watch the debate this week? The question becomes, who built the cages for the children at the border? Former Vice President Biden said Trump did that. President Trump says, no, Obama did that. What's the truth? The truth is the cages were built to detain unaccompanied children when Joe Biden was vice president. It didn't happen later on under Donald Trump. This from Jan Brewer, who's governor of Arizona, who served during the Obama years. Arizona, on the border, engaged. Her tweet came with a picture from 2014 that showed all was there then. Today, we seem to be routinely regaled with the plight of these abandoned children. Just this past Friday night, NBC News highlighted one such child, a young boy who has been cut off from his family in Nicaragua for several years. And the implication that you draw from this piece is that it's all Donald Trump's fault. But the question becomes, how did this child get here? Did his father abandon him in the United States? Walked him up to the border, sent him across, and went home? Or was the boy kidnapped and brought here? Or did the father actually pay people? They call them coyotes. Pay people to bring the child here, to give that child a better life. And how does that child get back home? Who's going to pay for that? And does the father want him back home? In the majority of cases, the answer is no. They don't want these children back. They hate their children. No. The child has a chance at getting citizenship here in this country. When that happens, the family can come. It's a process. The outraged news articles never tell you this stuff. They never answer any of these questions. They just throw the banner up there. DHS spokesman Chase Jennings told the Daily Caller News Foundation in a statement, quote, DHS has taken every step to facilitate the reunification of these families where the parents wanted such reunification to occur. The simple fact is that after contact has been made with the parents to reunite them with their children, many parents have just refused. Our government has contacted the parents of about 400 of these children, he says. Not one wants their child back. One Democrat state representative from Georgia asked, "How does a coyote bring a whole human being across the border?" I guess she's picturing a coyote picking a child up in its teeth and walking across the border. She's a Democrat state representative. These people not only vote, this one makes laws, and they're not even here. They don't even know what's going on. The reality here is when tens of thousands of people flood our borders every year, our government makes no realistic effort to stop it, ostensibly to get more people in who will then vote for them. How do you resolve the major issue regarding the children who came unattended, kidnapped, or sent in a year or 4? Especially when the parents view the circumstances as either good, necessary, or impossible to correct. They don't have the money to bring that child back. A Biden presidency? Biden favors the Hyde Amendment, public funding for abortions. He supported same-gender marriages, and that was before the court approved it. He has already stated that he will repeal the religious freedom, conscious rights of healthcare workers who decline to participate in abortion, adoption agencies placing children with homosexuals, requiring religious ministries to provide contraceptives and abortifacients to employees. This is socialism over God. 11 consecutive popes have repudiated socialism. Joe Biden's a Catholic. Nominally, but that's what he is. Of course, the current pope is a socialist. What are you going to say? A new survey found that President Donald Trump's approval rating among likely black voters skyrocketed between Monday and Friday of this week. The results of the Rasmussen Report's daily presidential approval rating tracking poll found that Trump's approval among likely black voters went from 25% on Monday to 46% on Friday. Trump's approval rating among this demographic actually decreased to 24% on Tuesday. 3 days later, he had doubled. University of Wisconsin-Madison psychology professor by the name of Marcus Brower, in a news release regarding a new study, said discrimination is not as prevalent nor as systemic as we once thought. We tried one situation, then another, and so forth, but study after study came back with the same result. Most parents did not treat our white actor more positively than the black, Asian, or Muslim actors. In this study, is discrimination widespread? It tested assumptions about bias on university campus. It was published this month in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. Brower, in an email interview with the College Fix, said the study's results are good news as long as the findings are not misinterpreted. Misinterpreted to suggest that there is no discrimination or bigotry at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. He said, our results show that certain acts of discrimination are, quote, perpetrated by a numerical minority of students. The study indicates its results should also not be interpreted to suggest marginalized students have an equally positive experience at large public universities as well as do other students. What's more, it adds, we do not mean to imply that students have marginalized groups having groups exaggerate the problem of discrimination on campus. It exists. We should tell the racists they are a numerical minority who don't fit in with the rest of us because we strongly support diversity and initiatives that dismantle systemic racism. Such a message would also lead to more inclusive behaviors among members of our primary target audience, that is, students who are neither very discriminatory nor very inclusive. Keep in mind that this may be simple academic theory. Human behavior is largely conditioned behavior, and in the academic world, liberalism reigns supreme. I also had to edit this report so that it could be readable according to ordinary rules of interpretation. And all of that is quite normal today. You read stuff and it doesn't sound like what it really is until you take the time to analyze it. It's amazing how educated people write. Those making these written reports tend to record what is literally said, not what is easily read. Nor do they follow the rules of English grammar, even in their commentary. It's pitiful. Former FBI agent Peter Strzok, who was fired in August 2018 after text messages revealed he said the agency would stop the election of Donald Trump. And ultra-liberal Texas politician Beto O'Rourke, a failed candidate for the U.S. Senate as well as the Democrat nomination for president, have both found new jobs. They're now professors at universities. Georgetown University is reported hiring Strzok as an adjunct professor in its Walsh School of Foreign Service. O'Rourke is slated to teach a class on Texas politics at Texas State University this upcoming spring semester. In a cartoon, a medical doctor speaking to parents of a small boy. The good news is that the odds of your child getting COVID if he returns to school are low. The bad news is that the odds of him getting woke are high. Woke, borrowed from the African vernacular, it means aware. Specifically aware that racial injustice and discrimination are mainstays of the American community. You have found that every day in your workaday world, have you not? And just so you know where we are, a headline shouted, "University tells student groups not to gather," but at the same time allowed a Black Lives Matter protest. Oh, and 98% of political donations from the University of Wisconsin system go to Democrats. Professors, teachers, others giving money to Democrats. And Oregon is being sued for banning religious schools while letting public schools reopen in person. Is your head scrambling? This is America at the end of the age. Did you know you had salivary glands in your head? Never thought about that before. ScienceAlert.com is telling us a new medical discovery shows what appears to be a previously overlooked pair of glands, a fourth set of major salivary glands located behind the nose above the palate, somewhere in here, close to the center of our head. Salivary glands are what produce the saliva essential for our digestive system to function. The bulk of the fluid produced by the three major salivary glands known as the parotoid, the submandibular, and the sublingual glands. Got to add a fourth. It looks like a mysterious set of salivary glands hidden inside the human head, which somehow have been missed by scientists for centuries. Additionally, it's only the newer PSMA PET/CT imaging techniques that have revealed this structure, going beyond the visualization capabilities of technologies like ultrasound, just plain CT and MRI scans. If it's real, they tell us, it could change the way we look at disease in this region. ProphecyNews.com is telling us about a new approach to abortion. The entertainment industry has been attempting to make feticide funny. You know what feticide is? Well, feticide is the killing of a fetus. It might be pronounced feticide, but that doesn't make sense. Earlier this fall, for example, HBO released a program entitled Unpregnant. It was a slapstick road trip comedy about two girls who head off across the United States without parental consent to procure an abortion. One adult and one baby are killed. But the laughs offset all that sadness. They have done the same with pornography, making it a punchline. And the goal? The goal is to normalize two of the most dangerous and degrading sexual practices known to mankind. Getting us to laugh at, to accept sin, has been a successful tool in the enemy's belt for decades. We have redefined marriage and now pedophilia. The same has been true for porn use. It's now a punchline in TV sitcoms. If porn addiction is funny, how can it also be the soul poisoning participation in the systemic degradation and often assault of women? There's nothing funny about that. But the reality is it can't. But the same is true for the normalization of any of the alternative lifestyles and the conditioning of audiences to accept the redefinition of marriage. You see, the enemy of your soul never rests. Who's going to vote next month? Will you vote? A recent study shows young people aged 18 to 34 are not Trump fans. And this demographic apparently would not vote for him. But that's if they vote at all. Tableau.com posted a candidate preference map that shows Biden trending over Trump by a 6% margin. And young people, 18 to 24, favoring Biden by 65% over 54% for Trump. 25 to 34-year-olds were better. It was 60 to 59. The mid-ranges are largely even, but when you get to the 65 and older group, it starts to spread out. 53 to 44% for Trump. Today, only 5 states show under 35 voters favoring Trump, age 35. Arkansas, Idaho, South Dakota, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Trump's re-election seems to hinge on young adults staying home, which of course they tend to do. Former President Obama made his first trial appearance for Joe Biden this week, speaking passionately, loudly, with a dash of humor for just over about a half hour at a rally in Philadelphia. It was a drive-in rally. People stayed in their cars. It looked like there were about 300 cars at the rally, an estimated 500 to maybe even 1,500 interested voters. In town, he spoke to a gathered group. About 20 people gathered to hear what this former president had to say. Our old friend Pat Robertson is still in the prophesying business. I say old friend because he's in his 90s. I've known 90-year-old men. Maybe you have too. I'm going to be one shortly. I get in my 90s, don't listen to me either. Robertson says God told him that Trump will win. Then, more than 5 years later, an asteroid will hit Earth and maybe bring about the end. What's he talking about? Well, speaking on the 700 Club, he said he was praying on Sunday, saying, God, please tell me how it's all going to happen. And then he says he sensed that he had received a word from the Lord. I have a question. It's the same question I ask all of these people. You've heard it before. Do you got a Bible verse for that? Do you have a Bible verse to support the idea that God speaks to people today with divine individual prophecy? No such verse. CBN News labeled it a prophecy, but then CBN is owned, at least it used to be, by Robertson, probably still is. Robertson himself said it was according to, quote, what I believe the Lord told me. He said, I hope I've got the word. But first of all, I want to say without question, Trump is going to win the election. And that doesn't mean you can sit home and don't vote. That means you get out and do everything you can. He went on to say that after Trump wins and is inaugurated in January, then trouble's going to happen. Doesn't take a seer to know that. He says he's going to be challenged by the Chinese as you couldn't believe. He will be faced probably with some kind of a war. The North Koreans are going to have nuclear weapons. They're going to threaten us. The Russians are going to do everything they can. The Turks have got their things going. And after Trump is sworn in, we're going to see civic disobedience in our America that will just be mind-boggling. The country is going to be torn apart. There will be at least 2 attempts on the president's life, and it's going to be very difficult. So I would urge you, you should pray for him. Amidst this turmoil, Ezekiel 38 will be fulfilled, Robertson said. That passage references God's protection of Israel. It will be the opportunity for Iran and other Muslim countries to come together against Israel, and that's what Ezekiel says is going to happen. They're going to say, because America is so occupied, we are therefore going to invade Israel. There's going to be an opportunity to crush and destroy Israel, and so there's going to be a tremendous war against Israel. The Bible says God himself is going to defend Israel. It won't be a nuclear war, Robertson said, but God himself is going to wipe out that horde of people that are coming against Israel. The next thing is going to happen is that God is going to bring a period of great peace. He then urged his audience to pray. Referencing the second coming of Christ, he added, the angels don't know the date. Only the Father knows it. So I'm not saying this is the second coming. But what I am saying is that there are things that people have thought would be during a millennial time with the coming of Jesus, but will happen in our lifetime. According to the Bible, if these are messages from God, they will happen. If they do not happen, under Old Testament law, Israel was required to execute the prophet who presumed to speak for God. The Bible is divided into 2 parts. Old Testament, where God spoke through prophets. New Testament, where God speaks through his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. And a small number of men who were specifically called of God to be his disciples and apostles. The Bible then ends with the prophetic book of the Revelation, a book that describes how this age and this world will end. This too through an apostle, John, the last apostle on the earth. Margaret Tlaib, writing from an Ipsos poll for Axios.com, exposes the fear that largely black folks have of voting this year. Apparently they fear armed militia, police, or COVID-19 awaiting them at the polls. These fears are disproportionately shaped, or disproportionately shaping, how Americans of color think about in-person voting. Why does any of that matter? Well, the polls show the lasting effects of voter suppression and disenfranchisement, and why people of color crave expansions of mail-in ballots, same-day registration, and the restoration of voting rights. 32% of black respondents to this poll and 30% of Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans are concerned about physical violence or armed militias at their voting locations, while only 1 in 5 white respondents share that fear. A third of black respondents, 29% of Asian Americans, 24% of Hispanic Americans worry the government could use in-person voting to serve warrants or arrest people. Just 14% of white respondents are worried about any of this. 29% of black Americans say they're very concerned about voter suppression in their home states, roughly twice the rate of other racial and ethnic groups. Now, looking between the lines, the views of white Republicans are significantly different than that of white Democrats. There's a 20-point gap between white Democrats and white Republicans who say they're concerned about voter suppression in their state. And the question becomes why? Why do citizens of the same state have such different views? Is it history? Is it their experience? Is it the media? I'm 77 years of age. I have lived in and around black people all my life. They were schoolmates, co-workers, neighbors, people I worshiped with, friends. There has not been one instance of animus between us. Disagreement, but disagreements that destroy our relationships, not one. Why is it all these other people have such problem? You know, fairness is the enemy of justice, right? ZeroHedge.com had an article about the San Diego Unified School District. It apparently has just announced that it will eliminate its previously used grading standards in order to combat racism. The move came about after it was revealed that just 7% of the D or F grades are handed out to white students. At the same time, 23% went to Native Americans, 23% went to Hispanics, and 20% went to black students. So now, instead of trying to develop an actual understanding of why this is taking place, the school district simply announces that discrimination and racism were the blame, and then embarks on a complete do-over of the grading system in order to combat this apparent injustice. Academic grades in the school will now not be dependent on early tests, meaning students could flunk them and not have it affect their final grade. It will not be dependent on grades. Grades will now focus on mastery of the material, not a yearly average. Can you say subjective? 1,000 years of educational experience, standards, thrown out because failing grades were, as they put it, handed out to minority students. I don't know about you, but no one ever handed me a grade. I earned every one of them. And no one ever blamed the teachers or the courses of study. They blamed me. Oh, and teachers will not be able to consider non-material factors like bad behavior in classroom or not handing in work on time when they're grading students. This means students will not be taught the material. Students will not be taught decent manners. They will not be held accountable. The students trying to get an education will be sacrificed on this altar of fairness. You do know that fairness is the enemy of justice. Quote, the board will also review potential student disparities stemming from its zero-tolerance disciplinary policy on cheating in the coming weeks. The horrific irony of all of this is that it will simply incentivize already underperforming students to act out in class and or miss coursework deadlines. There's no penalty. It epitomizes the liberal strategy for eliminating the racial disparities they endlessly obsess on, bringing everyone down to a lowest common denominator standard, instead of encouraging children to succeeding within their own areas of competence. It also debases education, supporting the progressive philosophy that took over our educational system more than 50 years ago. Technically, it was introduced before World War II. It's just that no one really knew what it was then. It has taken this long to percolate. And this just in. On Friday, 2 days ago, Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok and General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the military leader of Sudan's transitional military government, were both on a conference call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump. They were on this phone call to make peace with Israel. The quotation is, "Today Khartoum says yes to peace with Israel, yes to recognition of Israel, and to normalization with Israel." That according to the Washington Post. We're in real special times. When we come back, we'll look at what keeps God from calling us home. I wonder about that every once in a while. How about you? Stay tuned.